Hey lovelies, it's MLP with LovelyLouLouDesigns, and in this video I will show you how to make this dancing Northern Lights tumbler. This project is entirely hand painted using a combination of Chameleon pigment powders as well as acrylic paints, and I will walk you through the process I use step by step so you can recreate it. As always, I will link the materials I used to create this tumbler in the description section of this video. With that out of the way, let's get started. For this project, I'm going to be using the 20-ounce Skinny. This is a fully prepped stainless steel tumbler. I purchased my tumblers direct from manufacturer. However, I do recommend, if you're in Canada, DAHT merchandise. They have really great quality products and excellent customer service. So if you are looking for tumblers in Canada, that is definitely a supplier who carries the style that I do recommend. So this is a fully prepped tumbler, which basically means I have sanded it, I have cleaned it, and I have primed it. In this case, I used a black primer paint. I used Premier brand, which is available at Canadian Tire, but also you could use something like Rust-Oleum, the paint and primer. As long as it has a built-in primer, you'll be okay. So this is a flat black because it is a primer. The flat black won't matter when I put it under epoxy. It will get really glossy. But one thing you want to be careful about when you are spray painting is you want to make sure that you're not leaving any drips behind, because in this case you will see those drips since this is just going to be a painted tumbler. So the first step that we need to take to get this tumbler started is we're going to be adding the stars. So there's a few different ways that you can add stars. The first way that I've seen lots of people do is they take some white paint and they use a dotting tool, and they just basically dot the stars on all over the tumbler. For me, that's not my favorite method because it takes a lot longer, and I personally have a bit of a harder time making a pattern that doesn't look like it's been hand done. I guess I'm not so good at sort of making it look a bit sporadic. The other method that you can do is the one I'm going to be doing today, which is using a toothbrush to apply your stars. And my favorite method, which I'm not going to be doing today only because I know not everyone has this equipment and I want to make this something that everyone can do, is using either a airbrush or a spray gun, and you just reduce your air pressure almost completely off, just so that it sort of spits out a little bit of air. You use some white airbrush paint, and it just sort of gives you a bit of a misting of the color, and it gives you some really nice stars. So that's my favorite method, but we're going to be doing the toothbrush method. So it's a little bit of a messier method, and I'm kind of concerned that if I do it here at my desk, I'm going to get it onto my camera and on my phone. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take you over to my sink, and I'm going to show you guys how I do it over there. So for this method, I'm just going to be using an old toothbrush, and basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my thumb from the top of the toothbrush and I'm going to be flicking it down like so. But before I add the paint, what I want to do is I want to add just a little bit of water to my bristles. Not a lot, a little is going to go a long way. And before I even add the paint, what I want to do is I want to get most of the excess water off, just so there's a little bit in here but not a ton. And the reason why I do this is because I find that it does help to prevent larger clumps of the paint, because I don't want to have too many of the really thick stars. A couple is okay here and there, but I don't want to have it you know, like lots of globby looking stars. I want to kind of keep them a finer mist. So I've got just a little bit of that in there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some paint into my toothbrush, and while I want it to be in there, I don't want there to be so much, again, that I'm going to be really risking those like large clumps of paint. And I find that usually the first few times I flick my brush after I've added the paint is when I get most of those clumps. So I'm just going to flick it into my sink a little bit first as well. Then I'm going to be taking my tumbler and I'm just going to start flicking my stars onto my tumbler. So that's it there. It's just a nice, fine, subtle mist of stars. I really like this look. I'm going to let this dry. It's not going to take long because this is very fine, and as soon as it's dry, I can show you guys the next step. My stars are completely dry. They don't take a long time to dry. It's just a fine misting of acrylic paint, so I would say about 15 minutes, and they're pretty dry. However, one of the things that I do notice is that when I go to clean up some of the loose powder that settles, which I'll show you later, and I just do that with a paper towel and some water, I have accidentally rubbed away some of my stars before, so to prevent that from happening, I started adding a coat of spray sealer, and that really, really helps. It definitely goes a long way with protecting those stars so you don't accidentally clean them off when you're rubbing away some of your pigment powder that kind of falls where you don't really want it to. Before I go into showing you how I'm going to be doing the next step on this tumbler, I do want to do a really quick shout out to Melinda Shaw Honig, who did a fantastic tutorial in the Facebook group, the Cuptisseristas. She did the Dancing Northern Lights with hand-painted trees as well, and for her method, she used mica powders, but she applied them with Mod Podge and with hairspray to blend them out. She had really beautiful results, and it was the inspiration. That was what I originally started doing. However, I did add mountains before to sort of separate my night sky from my tree line. And before I was using stencils, I like to hand paint now because I find that I don't have to play around with masking, remasking, spray painting, and playing around with, you know, warp and stencils and size and that sort of thing. So it's a lot faster, it's a lot easier to just hand paint the whole thing. And I think you get some really nice results from it. So one of the things that I did is I did change the way that I do my lights. Rather than using the Mod Podge and the hairspray, I use Tack-It. The reason why I was looking for a bit of a different technique is for me personally, as I would be working with the materials, I would find that, you know, I'm just using a soft eyeshadow brush to apply them. This would start getting kind of clogged with the Mod Podge and the hairspray, and that would make it a little bit harder to work with the fine Chameleon powders or mica powders. So basically I switched it up a little bit to Tack-It instead, and I think I've got some pretty cool results with that method as well. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take a piece of chalk. It's going to be easier to see the chalk, and also if you kind of want to change your design, you just rub it away and it's really easy. You're not really committing to it. If you use pencil, first of all, if you're using pencil on spray sealer, it might be harder to see as well, but also once it's kind of on there, it's sort of harder to erase it. So I do like to use this when I'm sort of sketching out what it is that I want to be, like where I want to be placing my mountains and my lights. So I usually start with my mountains, and I'm just sort of doing the outline of them at this time. You don't need a lot of pressure, and I'm just going to kind of maybe draw one mountain there. I'll maybe put another mountain here a little bit lower. Maybe I'll do one here, a bit of a bigger mountain again. And this mountain is going to maybe have an additional peak right here. And then I'm going to come and attach it to my original mountain. So that's sort of where I'm going to have my mountains on my tumbler. So now what I want to do is I want to start adding where I want my lights to go. So I'm going to kind of do one swirling maybe up like this, kind of curtaining down a little bit. Maybe one kind of doing the same here. Maybe a bit of a straighter one here. And maybe one kind of coming like that here. It's okay if you have lights blending into each other. It gives you some neat effects as well. Just kind of by mapping it out first, it does make it a little bit easier for the next steps. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be using Tack-It. I don't dilute the Tack-It for this method, and I'm using a precision bottle. However, you can use a very small, fine paintbrush for this as well. If you find that your Tack-It after a while or after use gets a little bit clogged in your precision bottle tip, if you decide to use this method, all you do is you just take a pin and you just press it down into that tip a couple times, and it will just clear out your tip, and now you're able to use it again. Just putting my pin back. And then for this, all that I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a section and I'm going to apply the Tack-It just following that chalk line. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small flat brush like this, and starting on my line, trying to be kind of clean, not really pushing down below that line, I'm just going to flick the adhesive up. And as I'm getting towards the end of my flick, I am raising the pressure on the brush a little bit, and I'm just going to keep doing this until I don't see any more of the white streaks. Just going back and forth. There we go. And now that I don't see any more of that white, that basically means that this is already dry and ready to go. So what I'm going to do next, for my colors, I'm going to be using two different Chameleon powders from Cat Glitter Factory. This one is the blue purple. It came in the advent calendar. I don't know if it's up on the website yet, but I know it is coming very, very soon. So hopefully by the time this video is posted, it's already up. And the next one I'm going to be using is the Chameleon Lilac, Blue, and Green. And my last color that I'm going to be adding is the Pearl X Reflex Violet pigment powder. So this is just a purple. And I'm going to be using two different types of brushes to apply these powders. So for my base coat, my first color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the softer bristle eyeshadow brush. And in this case, I'm going to start with this one with the Lilac-Blue-Green, and you just dip your brush in. That's way too much. You do not need that much. A little goes a really long way. So I'm just going to knock off the excess. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of start by following that line, and then I'm going to start blending it up. If you need to add more to your brush, just dip back in, grab a little more. And then what I want to do is I want to blend in some of the purple and blue. And for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is a rougher bristle brush, and it's going to help get me some of those streaking textures for the light. So I just do the same thing, dip it in the powder, knock off the excess, and then right over top of where I did the other color, you're just going to blend this one on top. And then I'm going to do the same with the purple. This one is very, very pigmented. You really don't need a lot for this. And you can just add it in sections if you want. It doesn't have to go over the whole thing. So that's my first light. So if you look really, really carefully, you're going to see here there's a little bit where it's settled below my line. So this is what I was talking about, where I'm going to come back with a little bit of water and a paper towel, and I'm just going to wipe that clean. So now I'm going to do my next one, which is just going to dance up a little higher. I'll show you how I do the dancing one too, and then I'll kind of speed through the rest of them. So on this one here, which is kind of coming down as like a bit of a curtain, we're just going to follow that line. Kind of smooth it out here a little bit. And then using the straight brush, just doing the same thing and kind of just following that direction, making sure they're always kind of going upwards, flicking upwards. All right, now for this one here, I think I'm going to start with the blue instead. The blue purple chameleon. I'm going to do the same thing as before, just sort of follow that original path, and then from there flick up. And then now I'm going to go back with the green and my more textured rough brush. And do the same thing, really just follow that upward flick motion. So these pigments are going to pop a lot more once you've added your sealer or your epoxy. Right now, you don't see as much of them as you will when you've added those coats. So that's why, while you kind of only barely see some of the looser powder settle where you don't want it to, once you add your sealer and your epoxy, it will be more evident. So you do want to kind of keep that in mind when you're cleaning up your tumbler. And I'm going to add again just a tiny bit of that purple. And you can also say, you know, I only want the purple in the first part, and then it kind of stops being purple. It kind of just goes into the rest of the shift. You don't have to do it over the whole thing. You can really just sort of play around with the colors as you like them to look when they're dancing. Okay, so I'll do these two now really quickly. I'll speed these up for you so you can still kind of see them, but you're not sitting there bored. So I just added a little bit of water to my paper towel. So now all that I'm going to do is I'm just going to come underneath my lights and just do a little bit of a cleaning. You don't have to clean above the lights, because if there's a little bit in there, it'll just add to the effect of the dancing part, which is really nice. So I kind of like to leave it. It's just a little more subtle, which kind of makes it look like it's fading off a little bit more. But you do want to come underneath and clean the lights underneath. And then that's it. That's the light section. So now the next section is going to be the mountains, and for the most part I haven't rubbed off too much of my chalk, so I can still kind of see where it is that I want to be painting my mountains in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my tumbler back on its football, and now we're going to start getting it straight into the acrylic paint. The nice thing is you can go right into it. You don't have to wait for anything to dry. So I had to follow a tutorial. In full disclosure, I am not a freehand artist in any stretch of the imagination, so I watched lots and lots of tutorials on how to paint mountains with acrylic paint. A lot of them used palette knives like Bob Ross, and that's something that I don't have. Two, I don't really want to be doing on a tumbler. Another thing is that a tumbler is a little bit more challenging than a canvas because it connects to itself. So I was looking for something that already used materials that I had, and that I felt wouldn't really scratch away any of the paint on a tumbler. And I found one which I'm going to link below, and I'm going to do my best to kind of parrot her instructions back to you, but I will link it if you want to watch the original. So the first thing that you do is you want to be painting the base part of your mountain about a medium gray color. And she recommends mixing your paint rather than just using a gray paint that you have, because it will give you a bit of variation in the color, which will give it a little bit more of a realistic look and feel to it. So I'm going to take the flat side of my brush and just sort of follow along my mountain, and then from here, in just a clean single motion or a couple motions, but just a smooth line, I'm just going to start painting in that base color. The gray base paint is dry, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to come back in with my chalk and I'm going to outline first where my mountains are going to be. So which one's going to be in the foreground, which one's going to be kind of hiding, tucked behind the other mountain. And then once we've decided that, what we're going to do is we're going to split the mountain in half. So you'll have your shadow side and then your side that's reflecting the snow light. So one of the things that we need to keep in mind, which makes this different from canvas, is that these things are connecting. So what I'm going to be trying to do is I'm going to be trying to make it that I don't have two dark sides of the mountain touching or two light sides of the mountain touching, so it's easier to see the separation in the painting as we go. So I'm going to kind of look at my mountains and sort of choose which one I want to have be in front and which one I think should be tucked in behind. So I think that in this case here, I kind of want this guy here to be in the front. So I'm just going to mark him on both sides as being in the front. And this guy here I think will be on the back. And then for this one, I think we'll have this guy. So you're in the front. So I think we'll keep you in the front here. So now, like I said, when I'm going to be separating my snow side from my dark side, I want to keep in mind which is going to, like, what color is going to be touching what color. So I'm going to start off here with this mountain here, and I'm just going to start in the center and kind of taking my chalk. I'm just going to make some jagged edges, like so. And I'm going to do the same here. So this side is going to be white, so I want to make sure that I'm not having white really touching this line. So this is going to come out this way here, but then I'm going to swing it in a little bit here. And then for this one, I can just have it so I think, no, that's okay. So I think what we'll do here, we'll do the same here. Okay, because if I brought the white or the dark side to here, then the white would be touching the white of this section of the mountain too, so I want to avoid that. So I think I've done a reasonably good job separating those. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my little plate and we're going to start with our white side. So I'm just going to take some more white acrylic paint. Again, it's that Apple Barrel brand, but it doesn't matter what brand you use. Maybe a little more. It doesn't matter what brand you use, just as long as it's a white acrylic paint. And I'm going to be taking my same flat edge paintbrush. And in this case, I've got more control, I find, when I don't have it on the football. So I'm going to keep it off the football here, but that means I have to be careful with where I'm touching it, so I'm not accidentally touching any wet paint. So I'm going to start off by using the more narrow part of my brush and just kind of outlining that mountain. And then from here, I'm just going to drag down in this direction. And it's okay if I don't have full coverage all the way down to the bottom like that. That's fine. I'm going to do the same here. And I'm just going to keep doing that, following this line. So that's the first white side of the mountain, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to do the rest of the cup as well. So one of the things I did at the end was I just kind of took my brush and I smoothed any areas where it looked like it maybe could use some smoothing. And it's, like I said, it's okay if you don't have full coverage. This is just giving you that extra texture in your painting. So I'm going to now move on and continue doing the white side around the rest of the tumbler. The white's now dry enough for me to be able to handle it. Still be careful though, because if you do have a spot that was a little bit thicker and takes a little bit longer, if you get it on your finger and then touch someplace else, you don't want to accidentally spread the paint where you don't want to, or put it on a football if that's easier for you. That's fine too. So the next thing that I'm going to be doing is I want to do the dark side of the mountain, and when I do the dark side of the mountain, I'm going to be cleaning up these lines here that you see on the white. So they are going to fix themselves and look better. So I just gotta kind of get in there and use the flat edge to kind of make some sharper lines. But what I need to do first is mix up my color. So again, I'm going to be taking some black. I'm going to be taking some white. And also some blue. So it's just a darker blue. I'm using Brilliant Blue. It's what I had. I don't have a lot left. This is a very used color for me, but you don't need a lot of the blue. And you're just gonna mix a color until you're pretty happy with it. And you're basically looking for like a dark gray blue. So you want it to be light enough that when you have it against the night sky, you can still see that it's a different color. It kind of still pops off of that, but give you enough contrast so that you don't see it so much. Sorry, give it enough contrast that it's not competing too much with the white. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my brush, and using that flat side, I'm just going to trace out the edge of my mountain there. I'm going to do the same here. This is going to where you're going to get those cleaner lines. I wasn't so concerned about the lines when I was doing the white, but now I am concerned. This is my last layer to kind of cover my mountains, so I want to make sure that I'm making clean lines now. And now you're going to be doing a smooth motion coming down on the opposite side in the opposite direction. Okay. So go back in and touch up any area you need to. And then I can move on to my next section. So I'm just going to speed this up now but I'm going to follow the same instructions the rest of the way through. Okay, so just like before, now that I have the blue side done, I spotted a couple spots on the white that I want to touch up, just where I sort of missed, like here I kind of had a misstep. I missed sort of some of the gray here. So I'm just going to go back in with my more fine detail brush in a minute, but I'm going to give a chance for the dark gray to dry now, and then we're going to do some of the shadows and highlights on the mountain as well. This is mostly dry. I just have a couple spots that are still a little bit wet, so I decided to pop it back on the football just because I kind of want to get to the end product of this. So what I needed to do, as I mentioned, was I first wanted to just touch up a couple little spots. So I'm just taking my smaller flat brush like that, and I'm just going to dip it into some white paint again and just kind of touch up where it needed it, where I missed it. I had one there, I had one here. Had a section here. And just bring this up. Okay, so that's good. So now what I want to do next is I want to start adding my highlights to my dark side of my mountain. So I've got the white here, but I don't want it to be, I don't want a ton on my brush. I just want a little bit. So almost like a dry brush. So you just kind of dip some in and then take a lot of it off. You can use a paper towel for that. You can use a plate or whatever it is that you're using to mix your paints on. And you're just going to kind of hit it a little bit on a few sections just to put in a few highlights in your mountain. This is optional. You can skip this as well if you want. Okay. And if you want, you can also try to blend it out just a little bit more. I've just got some water on this. It's totally up to you. But you can maybe soften it a little bit by just using a brush with a little bit of water on it. Or if you find that you have a spot that is too much done, you can come in with your original color. And you can layer a little bit of that color on it too. Just to kind of give it a bit more of a subtle look. Kind of just play with it until you see the results that you like. And now I'm going to do the darker side, but I think I'm going to lighten my darker color just a little bit more. I don't want it to be too deep of a color on here. Just gonna kind of do the same thing, just add a little bit of extra. You can use different parts of your brush too, like you can use the thinner side in some sections, you can use your wider part in others, just to kind of help break up your mountain a little bit and just give a little bit more shadow. And just kind of play with it until you're happy. Once you're happy with your highlights, what you can do is you just want your mountains to dry, and then we will come back in and we'll add our trees. Mountains are dry. Here they are close up with the lights. You can see where we are so far. Now I need to add the trees. So in order to add the trees, I'm going to be doing some Bob Ross Happy Little Trees. I'm going to be using the fan brush technique. Again, there are tons of tutorials on YouTube on how to do these hand painted trees with fan brushes. So if you want to have a little bit further of a deep dive in how to do them, if you find I don't do them quite the way you want to, or maybe I don't explain it the way that you understand it. This is how I do it though, but you can find them on YouTube, no problem. So I'm going to be doing them starting off with some black acrylic paint. And just like my mountains, I'm going to be doing some that are going to be taller, some that are going to be shorter, some that are going to be wider, and some that are going to be thinner. I use these kind of like mini versions of the fan brush. The reason for that is because I find I have extra control and it's not a large surface that I'm doing it on. I got this just as a set on Amazon. The handles were really, really large, so I did break them off because they just kind of hit everything all the time. I'm super clumsy in real life. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of look at my mountains and I want to sort of decide if there's anywhere where I really feel that a tree should go. And there's two spots. I definitely want to have one tree here to kind of cover this area here where it's kind of a little bit strange. And I think I want to do it here as well to make sure that I'm sort of covering a tree here on this line here. So this is kind of the nice thing, is that you have, by layering sort of your design, you can kind of come back and sort of play with it how you want to. So I'm going to take my smaller of my two fan brushes. This was a set, like I said, from Amazon. I'll try to find it and link it down below. And what I want to do is I want to add a fair amount of paint onto my brush. And when I'm getting started and I'm just doing the tip, I'm going to turn my fan brush vertically like so, and I'm going to maybe start, it's a pretty tall mountain, so I'm going to start maybe right about here, and I'm just going to start by kind of dabbing it on, and I've kind of got my brush at a little bit of an angle. I'm just kind of coming back and forth. Really easy like that. I'm just kind of going from one direction to the other direction, getting a little bit longer in my strokes towards the bottom. And then when I get right down to the bottom, I'm just going to take the edge of my brush and I'm just going to fill it in like this, because I'm going to be doing all the way around the bottom black, just like that, almost like a bit of a ground. And that's going to be my first tree right there. And I'm going to want to put one right in here as well. So again, if you're holding your cup, you want to be careful not to accidentally put your palm on another piece of wet paint. So I'm going to reload my brush with paint, and I'm going to do the same thing. And again here, I'm going to do a bit of a taller tree. I'm going to come up to about here, starting with my brush vertically. It's very light dabs. You don't need a lot of pressure here. You can always go back in and fill it in more if you find you need to. A little too much here. And then just again on the bottom, just kind of giving it a little bit of that black bottom there. Okay, so that's tree number 2. So now I think I want to put in a bit of a shorter tree, maybe make it a little bit fatter. So I'm going to start it lower down and maybe a little more over to the side. And with this one, I am going to kind of branch it out a little bit wider, starting a little bit earlier to get that fatter look. Okay, so then there's another tree. And we're gonna do another one here. So I'll just finish filling in these trees and then I'll show you how I add a little bit of snow to them. Okay, so I have my trees all filled in. So now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of snow to my trees. So I'm going to go back to the white acrylic paint. And I'm going to use my other smaller sized fan brush. And you don't need a ton of paint on this one here to do this effect. And just kind of over some of the black, just kind of spot on a little bit of snow. All right, and then my last step is I'm just going to take the black paint and I'm just going to make sure on the bottom that I've covered any other colors that have maybe come down around that edge, and I'm just going to paint it with the acrylic paint. So once this has fully dried, what I need to do next is I need to spray seal this first. And the reason why I need to do that is because this was made with loose pigment powders. So if I use a brush on sealer or if I go straight to epoxy, I run the risk of smearing and smudging some of my lights, and you don't want to have that happen. So I'm going to do 1 or 2 coats of spray sealer, and then I really like to use a coat of quick coat before I epoxy because I like the finish that I get on the epoxy. So I'm going to do the sealing and the quick coat, and then I'm going to come back and show you the last little thing I'm going to do to this tumbler on my turner. So last night after I applied the spray sealer and I took a bit of a closer look at my tumbler, I realized I forgot to put the snow on one of the trees, which I believe was this one. So I just added the snow on the tree on top of the sealer. That's not a problem. And then I did my 1 coat of the quick coat on top of that as well. So this is completely dry and it's now ready for epoxy. So I've already mixed up my epoxy, and what I did with this layer was I added a very, very small amount of a glitter additive in like a silver hollow. From Cat Glitter Factory, it is Bling It Up in Ultra Fine, and what I did was I just took like the tip of my metal mixer, like this much here, and just dipped a little bit in there, sprinkled it in my epoxy and mixed it in with it. So that's sort of how much it is. So it's just going to give a little bit of a shimmer. It's not going to really color it, but it's just going to give a bit of a sparkle because I like that for the stars, the snow sparkles, that sort of thing. So for me, I like to add that. Again, that's totally optional. So I just now start to apply my epoxy. And this is different from a lot of my other tumblers because most of my tumblers require multiple layers to decorate and design. This one doesn't. It's already completely fully decorated. I'm not adding a decal to this or anything like that. So you want to be aware though that you don't want to put too little epoxy on it either, because too little epoxy will make it fragile. So what I usually do is, today I'm going to do the single coat, and then I will do a flood coat. My first coats always are a little bit thinner, and then I'll come back in a few hours and I'll do that flood coat. Then after that, I'll feel confident doing a very, very light sand. You don't want to do a lot of sanding on this. You're just looking to scuff up the surface, a small amount of your epoxy, just to give the next layer a little bit of grit to hold on to. And then I will do one coat and then another flood coat after that. So that's really all that it takes to do these ones. These ones are nice and quick. For me, this style of cup that I have, like I said, I buy my tumblers from manufacturer. This one has, in the bottom of it, it has a pretty deep center section. So I am going to have to take an extra day to fill that section in with some epoxy in order to put my label on the bottom. I know there's a lot of controversy to put your label on the bottom or not. My labels have the care instructions as well as my logo. I buy lots of tumblers or even mugs that have that on there, not even from other artists, just from, like, I mean, I have a Doctor Who one that has BBC stamped on the bottom. So for me, you know, like, that's just sort of part of the package. It has the care instructions, so that's important for my customers to know as well. And this way, my work is signed, no one else can try to pass it off as theirs, and my customers know where they purchased it from. So that's my school of thought. I know it's not everyone's. I'm just going to let this turn for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come in. I will torch out any micro bubbles, but really for this tumbler, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please support me by giving it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please click my logo to subscribe and tickle that little notification bell so you'll be notified of future videos I post. You can also check out more of my videos by clicking on one of the thumbnails on the right or by scrolling through my playlist. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back for more tumbler tips and tutorials.